Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. I really appreciate it. The goal of today's session is to familiarize NTD reporters with the safety and security reporting requirements and the individual reporting forms. As always, we hope that the knowledge you gain today will make your job easier, and we sincerely appreciate your commitment to safety and security reporting. For those of you that report for purchase transportation providers in the system as PT, as I'm sure you know, please share this presentation with them so that they are also aware of what you're required to report to NTD. The presentation may also be helpful for those of you that provide data provide data to you from other departments, again, so that they're aware of what you're required to include. So today we're going to show you how to access the NTD system and navigate through the menus. We'll also discuss how setup is achieved and review the safety package navigation. And then we're going to go through each of the safety and security reporting forms, including to all the forms you see listed here. So as Lori mentioned, I'm going to be starting us off today. But we also have our two other hosts on board from the safety validation team, as Lori mentioned, James Overbeek and Grace Walton. We also have other key contacts for question, one of whom is Chelsea Champlin, the NTD program manager, and Joseph Eldridge, our NTD operations center manager. If it's also helpful when you're asking your questions, if you can, in the Q&A box, if you refer to what slide you may be talking about, just for clarity. And that helps us kind of zero in on what you're specifically looking at. Okay, so again, first we're going to have a brief overview, and then we'll get into the navigation and so forth. And we're going to do things a little bit differently in this session in the interest of time, because we do have so much to cover with the changes that are being made, the form changes, and of course the new assault on transit worker information that we need to provide. We're going to skip a few slides in this session, and then later on near the end of the presentation as well. So the information is still important. It's still provided in the download that you will have. So those slides have not been removed. We're just going to skip over a few so that you can refer to those on your own when you download the presentation itself. Okay, so I'm just going to go over to slide 10, and only going to talk a little bit about this. I really just wanted to point out the second bullet here, the NTD data link, which is available from the NTD web page. This is the home page where you see the kind of funny looking little graph before you log into NTD. And these links are on the left-hand side of that graph. So the NTD data section provides access to published data products, including the Safety and Security Time Series file, which is an excellent source for reviewing your own agency's data and statistics, in addition to being able to compare your data with other agencies, perhaps of a similar size, for peer review and that kind of information. Gives you a quick snapshot of everything you've reported. You'll also find other current annual data products and profiles and monthly ridership statistics and the National Transit Summaries and Trends document and so forth. So, and another thing that is now posted on there, and we'll also show you that link later on at the end of the presentation, is the frequently asked questions. And we have added a number of questions about the assaults on transit worker in there, so you'll be able to review that. Another reason why I wanted to point that out. And of course, as we go through these question and answer sessions, it helps us to see what other kinds of information we need to add to our frequently asked questions. So it helps us out a great deal too. All right. So let's go over to slide 18 and I'll pick it up. All right. So safety and security, setup and navigation. All right. Safety and security packages are automatically generated at the beginning of each new calendar year based on the agency's previous reporting status. Modes and types of services available in the safety module are determined by the agency's P20 form. If you see any unexpected changes to your modes or types of services, or you have any questions about the modes or types of services that you see, you would want to contact the person in your agency who submits the annual reporting data. That's who that P20 is completed by. Please do not attempt to modify the P20 profile, as any changes that you make there can affect all aspects of reporting. You actually put in an end date, it can delete data that you've put into the system and so forth. So please always touch base with that annual reporter on your staff. The safety packages give you access to all of the safety and security reporting forms that you see listed here. Our SNS 20 for our CEO certifications, which many of you have recently dealt with. The SNS 30 security configuration forms, which you also recently had to handle to complete those SNS 30s before you could report. And of course, our major and non-major reports. We're going to go through details on all of these as we go through the presentation. From the Home tab, navigating in NTD, you would want to click on the Safety tab module there, you see, to view the available safety packages by the years that are available. Now, this one actually shows 3 years, but we actually closed out 2020. So right now, you'd only see the 2 years for 2021 and 2022. To open a package, you click on the blue folder link and the agency ID on the left-hand side. And then the next screen to appear, once you do that, would be the dashboard, where you can access you can actually see all of your reports and so forth that you have. And we'll talk about how you get all that this next screen. So this is a screenshot of the dashboard, of the landing page. At the top of the screen, you see the reporting year, your agency's ID number and name. And then beneath that is your safety analyst's name and email address, and the safety and security reporting start and end dates, which is the current calendar year. Safety and security data is reported on a calendar year rather than a fiscal year like your annual reporting data. Below that, you see 3 filter boxes. You see the form name filter box, which is used to limit which forms you see on the screen, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. The form status filter, which will allow you to filter the grid below, the table below, by what's been returned, so you can see what you need to address, what's been approved, what's been submitted, etc. And you can also restrict the mode and type of service that you'd like to see. Below the filters are the table, of course, and you can sort the table, that grid there, by any of the column headings you see. So one click on the column heading will sort it by alphabetically or numerically, and then another click will reverse sort it. Remember, for this screen, you can't actually open any of the forms. This is just a landing page. To access any of the forms and open them and be able to enter or submit forms, you would need to click on the NTD Safety Forms button in the upper right-hand corner. Now, when you click on that, it looks very similar. This is the actual dashboard. It looks very similar to the landing page. And you can still sort and filter just like we just discussed on the previous screen. To actually open the forms, you would click on the blue link that you see. All right, now start talking about some of our policy changes. Events with assaults and homicides occurring as a result of a collision are to be reported as a collision event, not as a personal security event that you did last year in 2022 and prior. This is to align with the suicides and attempted suicide collection practices currently in place. Assaults on a transit worker are to be reported whether or not there is an injury. Events with injuries will continue to be reported as a major event. Transit worker assaults with no injury are to be reported on the SNS 50 form. And of course, we're going to go in much more detail later on. This is just a brief overview of all of the changes. So this change in the collection of assaults on transit workers is also in effect for commuter rail operations as well. This means that our commuter rail reporters, the Alaska Railroad, and all of the hybrid rail modes will now complete monthly SNS 50 summary reports in addition to the major events they already report. These clarifications to the SNS 30 and the SNS 50 form are not new. However, they are now included in the policy manual. They were kind of launched mid-year. The SNS 30 security form is due by the end of February to coincide with the January SNS 50 due date. Also, as some of you may know, the monthly summary SNS 50 form must now be submitted prior to the end of the month, must not be submitted prior to the end of the month, excuse me. And this is just to show that all of the data has been reviewed and captured for the month. If it's submitted mid-month, we're going to return it back to you and ask you to re-review your data and then resubmit in order to get a submit date after the end of the reporting month. On the SNS 50 non-major form, we've added a table to collect the non-major assaults on transit workers, which includes columns for various locations and if the assault was a physical or non-physical one. We've also added a text box for agencies to provide more details about the types of assaults or the locations of the assaults or risk factors, etc., any additional details they'd like to provide. For the other safety occurrences or safety incidents, as it's called in the rail section, we added locations of, well, let me back that up. We are going to add locations of platform and parking facility and a text box for whenever a reporter chooses an other location and then an other category. We have long return reports for these types of things, this other box and what they are. We're trying to capture what that's collecting there from the reporters. And these three options, I included them in this presentation because I expected them to be launched by now, but unfortunately they are not launched right now. So if you get to the SNS 50 form and you're looking for platform or parking facility, they're just not quite there yet. But they should be coming pretty soon, and then you'll see them launch onto the SNS 50 forms. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the changes to the SNS 40s. Setup screen 1, which it lists the event types, had changes to the collision type to ensure reporters understand that a collision includes assaults and assaults that result in a homicide, as we just mentioned. And we noticed that the attempted suicide and suicide wording was missing from the personal security form option or personal security event option. So that is also going to be added into that list on setup screen 1. Also on the other vehicle form, and again, this is one that launched mid-year, we've included a section for non-revenue maintenance vehicles in that list so that you no longer have to choose other in that case. On the personal security form, we removed 2 lines that were no longer necessary. Again, these were removed mid-year 2022, but we haven't had training since then, so we just wanted you to be aware that we took out these 2 textual lines that are on that form. They just didn't really serve any purpose. On the personal security form, there are new subsections that will appear, as you will see again in greater detail, if assault or homicide is chosen, which supports the collection of the transit worker assaults per the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Again, we'll go into more details on these, and you'll be very, it'll be very clear in the coming slides. Okay, and we have 3 changes to the injury and fatality forms were made. These changes only appear for collision events. These changes were needed, again, to support the collection of the transit worker assault requirements. The attempted suicide checkbox on the injury form was changed to include selections for no assault, attempted suicide, and assault. Similar changes were made to the fatality form except to represent suicides. We also made distinct changes to the trespasser box, for clarity on both the injury and fatality forms and a trespasser selection is also now required information. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Grace.
Thank you so much, Anne. Let me get to the right screen. So, on the personal security form, we removed 2 lines that were no longer necessary. These were actually removed in 2022, but we have not had training since then, so we just wanted you to be aware. On the personal security form, new sub-options appear if the event is either assault or homicide to support data collection of transit worker assaults per the BIL. We will be going into more details in the appropriate areas of this training, so please save your questions regarding this until later. Three changes to the injury and fatality forms were made. These changes only appear for collision events. Again, these changes are not needed to support the BIL requirements. The attempted suicide checkbox on the injury form was changed to include selections for no assault/attempted suicide and assault, and similar changes to the fatality form, except to represent suicides. We also made distinct changes to the trespasser box for clarity on both the injury and fatality forms, and a trespasser selection is now required. That concludes the navigation. Now let's move on to working with each safety and security form. The first one being the SNS 20 or the CEO certification form. The SNS 20 CEO certification form is the CEO's confirmation of the accuracy of the safety and security data for the previous calendar year. The form becomes available on January 15th in the previous year's safety package. The form automatically calculates data from the submitted reports throughout the year. Unsubmitted data is not included. The form is due by the end of February, and only a person logged in as the CEO or CEO delegate role can submit the form. Late notices are sent to the CEO. Data reporters should review their data to ensure it matches the data in the SNS 20. Agencies should also use any in-house reports available to help verify the data. Also, the historical lookup report on the Reports tab may be helpful, as it shows incident counts by month. If the data does not match, check to ensure that all safety data reports are submitted. Unsubmitted data is not included in the SNS 20. You may add or delete SNS 40s or edit SNS 50 data, and the SNS 20 will automatically recalculate the numbers. Remember to always notify your safety analyst if you delete any data or reports. You or your CEO will check the confirm box adjacent to the data. Then the CEO can click on the submit button. Once the form is submitted, it cannot be resubmitted, but the form auto-calculates each time it is opened. This is a snapshot of the 2020 SNS 20 CEO certification form, but this current year's form is identical. Please notice that the CEO name and title shown, that this is a screenshot of our test database, so we are not showing any actual data reported to it by an agency. This concludes the SNS 20 data. Now, we're going to take a look at the security confirmation form, security configuration form, SNS 30. The SNS 30 security configuration form collects the number and type of security personnel employed or contracted by your agency. The form is completed once a year at the beginning of the calendar year, and it is due by the end of February. You're not required to update this form during the year. All SNS 30s must be completed and submitted to enable reporting. If you cannot create or edit an SNS 40 or an SNS 50, it is because one or more of the SNS 30s is not submitted. All SNS 30 forms should be completed by the end of February. Those of you who have completed the SNS 30 will notice that you have the usual boxes to enter the number of primary security personnel and a box to enter the number of secondary security personnel. The total number of security personnel now calculates the figures from the primary and secondary boxes. Below the boxes are 7 selections for identifying the primary and secondary personnel types. The primary security force is the one that routinely responds to events and/or is assigned to patrol your agency or property. The secondary security force occasionally responds to or responds when the primary force requires assistance. Please use a count of 0 for the use of local police non-contracted selection. The number of personnel is reported in full-time equivalent hours. So 1 full-time equivalent hour equals 1 person working a 40-hour week or 2,080 hours per year. Prorate the number of personnel if the person works only part-time providing transit security, or they provide security for more than one mode. 1 SNS 30 is completed for each mode. Be careful not to double count personnel. The value in the total number of security personnel from each SNS 30 form should equal the total number of agency security personnel. For example, a DRDO mode has a total number of 0.5, MBPT has 1.5, and LRDO mode has 3.0. This means that for the total security, it would be 5 full-time equivalent employees. If your security force covers multiple modes, you may use any reasonable method for determining FTEs. That may include the modal ridership or the number of employees covering each mode. If an agency contracts for security and pays a monthly fee based on services used, they should determine FTE based on the previous year's total hours worked. NTD allows for only 1 primary personnel type. If your agency has more than 1 type of security personnel it considers its primary, report the security force with the largest number of personnel as the primary and the smaller force as the secondary. For further information on the SNS 30, please see the SNS policy manual on the NTD website, or you can ask your analyst for assistance. Now, let's look at non-major reporting. The definition of a reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle that meets non-major thresholds. You see here a short list of thresholds. Fires and assaults both require no injury or any other major event threshold, and fires must have been suppressed. Other safety events pertain to single injury only events. The respective forms were updated for full reporters at the beginning of April. April 2023 is the effective date for data collection and will be the focus of our validation efforts. However, we know some agencies have been preparing for these changes and may have data ready to report prior to the April effective date. FTA welcomes data for prior months, but it is not required. There are some exclusions to non-major events, which are events occurring at bus stops or shelters that are not on transit-owned property unless it involves a person boarding or alighting, and OSHA events that occur in administrative buildings. Transport of an individual, solely for mental health evaluation unrelated to a specific event, due to a person stating they want to harm themselves where there is no evident injury, those transported solely for intoxication or drug overdose, and finally, injuries from collisions, even what you may call a minor collision or any other major reportable events. Non-major data collection will include a count of monthly assaults on transit workers that did not result in an injury. Any assault that results in an injury will continue to be reported on the SNS 40 major event form. Other safety occurrences must meet the single injury only threshold and are related to falls, electric shock, smoke, etc. If the safety event results in multiple injuries, the event is bumped up to a major report. The SNS 50 form also collects the number of non-major fires where there was no evacuation, injuries, fatalities, or property damage, but it still required suppression. There are a couple of key terms and their respective definitions to become familiar with. Understanding these definitions will help you determine which assaults on transit workers you need to include on the SNS 50 form. The first is transit worker. This new definition was made specifically to include volunteers as workers. The existing definition of a transit employee, however, includes that the worker is one who is compensated by the transit agency. The second is assault on a transit worker. NTD is adopting the statutory definition of assault on a transit worker, which is a circumstance in which an individual knowingly, without lawful authority or permission, and with intent to endanger the safety of any individual, or with reckless disregard for the safety of human life, interferes with, disables, or incapacitates a transit worker while the transit worker is performing the duties of the transit worker. In the non-major transit worker assault section, you will record the number of non-injury worker assaults that occurred during the reporting month, which will include the location of assault and the type of worker that was assaulted. As you can see, there are two types of worker: vehicle operators and other transit worker. This is a new definition based on the requirement of the BIL. These definitions may also be found in the NTD glossary. There are two types of terms used to collect the assault type. These terms classify an assault as physical or non-physical. In a physical assault, the assailant makes physical contact with the worker by body, by an object, weapon, or any projectile. Projectiles may include bullets, any liquids, the assailant's saliva, or any other substance. Non-physical assaults, there are no physical contact with the worker. Non-physical assaults could include verbal threats, harassment, or interference with the worker's duties. For example, interference with the operator's ability to continue service by refusing to get off the vehicle when asked. The form also provides an additional details text box to provide additional information about one or more of the assaults. A description is not required, but it may be helpful, for example, for identifying risk factors or other pertinent information. A final note on the SNS 50 assault collection. Do not use this to report all of your assaults, meaning do not report and combine major assaults into this table with the non-major assaults. In the first scenario, a passenger on a bus refuses to pay the fare and spits on the operator. The operator denies transportation. You would report this as a physical assault on an operator. In the second scenario, the passenger's refusal to exit the bus so the doors may close prompts the operator to leave their seat and approach the passenger. This interferes with the operator's duty to drive the vehicle. Report the assault on the transit operator. This would be considered a non-physical assault. On the form, enter the number of safety occurrences and the matching number of injured parties. Remember that the term injured means that the person was transported away from the scene for medical attention, regardless of whether they appear to be injured or not. Do not include people who were not transported away from the scene for medical attention. Reported injuries are captured in 3 of the following categories as shown. The other category might include a person bumping into the side of a stopped transit vehicle. We would not expect to see any other injuries reported in the in-vehicle locations or for the non-revenue facility options. For these 2 locations, the catch-all other locations, we will always ask you to define who this person is. Here are several examples of injuries reported on the SNS 50. Passenger thrown out of a seat due to a hard brake, improper wheelchair securement and a rider is injured, transit vehicle door closing on an arm, leg, backpack, or clothing, person walks/bumps into a non-moving transit vehicle. Again, non-major fires are ones that are suppressed but do not meet any other major threshold. And non-rail mode should never report a fire on the right-of-way, as this refers to only rail modes. 2 of the categories for injuries on the SNS 50 form relate to securement issues. Securement issues are those related to an injury resulting from improper securement of a mobility device, such as a wheelchair or a scooter. So these are reported as other in-vehicle securement issue. The other category is for other in-vehicle, not a securement issue. These are slips, trips, falls while on a vehicle, or for being thrown from a seat during a vehicle maneuver. This is a screenshot of the entire SNS 50 monthly summary report form that captures the monthly account of assaults on transit workers, non-major fires, and other safety incidents or occurrences. The rail and non-rail versions are slightly different. Here, we have an enlarged screenshot of the non-major worker assault section so you can clearly view the selections in the table. You can see the rows for the location and 2 columns each for operator or other worker physical assaults and non-physical assaults. The additional details text box, which is optional, allows for 4,000 characters, so you will have plenty of room for pertinent details. I would like to point out that there are 2 tool tips, which are identified by the question mark blue circles. These tips will provide additional guidance on what the selection may include. Commuter rail, Alaskan Railroad, PATH, and certain hybrid rail modes that previously did not complete monthly SNS 50s will see this portion of the form on their newly generated SNS 50 forms. Complete and submit 1 form for each mode or type of service monthly. If there is no qualifying safety events that occurred for the month and mode, then you will select the No Data to Report checkbox, then save and submit. The SNS 50 is completed regardless of whether there were any major or non-major events. Please do not submit prior to the end of the reporting month. The form must show a submit date after the last day of the month that it is due. The NTD system sends automated late notices on the 1st and 5th of each month if the data has not been submitted. Please note that a report that has been saved but not submitted is still considered late. If you get a late notice, please check to ensure all of your reports are submitted. If a form is still not submitted by the 15th of the month, a 3rd late notice is sent by your analyst. If there are extenuating circumstances as to why you cannot report, please advise your safety analyst. Remember, do not include injuries due to collisions, hazmat, system security, or acts of God events on the SNS 50. The SNS 30 and SNS 50 forms can be modified at any time. Some reporters like to enter events as they occur during the month. For these reporters, they can modify the form and save and close the form after each change. Your validation analyst reviews each report for accuracy. If we have any questions, we may return the report to you, call, or email you with our concern. If the return feature is used, the user login listed under the last modified user column will receive the email. Editing the SNS 40 forms will be reviewed at the end of that section. Now I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to James.
Thank you, Grace. Now let's take a look at major event reporting. A reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility or yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle and meets a reporting threshold. SNS 40 reports are due no later than 30 days from the event date. Please make every effort to report in a timely manner. There are some exclusions to the applicability, such as events that occur off transit property where persons, vehicles, or objects come to rest on transit property after the event. OSHA events in administration buildings, death from illness, drug overdose, or natural causes, including those found deceased. Other events such as assaults, robberies, non-transit vehicle collisions occurring at bus stops, shelters, not on transit-owned property, unless it involves the person boarding or alighting, or involving a transit revenue vehicle, and non-revenue service vehicle, supervisor or transit police vehicle collisions that occur while traveling to or from a transit-related maintenance activity while operating on public roads. Now that we have discussed the exclusions, here are the major event thresholds. Fatality, which includes suicide and confirmed within 30 days of the event. 1 or more persons immediately transported for medical attention and injury. property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000, evacuations of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons, a collision involving a transit roadway revenue vehicle, which results in either the transit roadway vehicle or a non-transit roadway vehicle being towed away from the scene for disabling damage. Here are a few examples of events that are reportable to NTD. People who are still standing when the transit vehicle starts moving fall and are injured. If a deadheading or out of service vehicle is involved in a collision, or there is a fire in a bus garage meeting a reporting threshold, these are reportable. Maintenance-related activities are included in reporting. Here you see a few examples of maintenance-related activities that are reportable. The mechanic falls into the pit, resulting in a fatality. A maintenance employee is hit by a vehicle in the yard and is injured. Less severe injuries to maintenance workers are captured on the SNS 50 monthly summary report, along with non-major injuries to passengers and patrons. Now we have some examples of events that are not reportable. An employee injured on a city street or other property that is not transit-owned property. A person waiting at a bus stop and is hit by a car is not reportable since the person was not on transit-controlled property. An assault or robbery that occurs if the person is boarding alighting at the time. You will remember that part of the event definition states involving a transit revenue vehicle. However, NTD also collects non-transit collision incidents, such as an accident in transit parking lot that meets the threshold. A few examples are private vehicle collides with pedestrian or vehicle requiring immediate transport for medical treatment. A private vehicle collides with transit property, such as a station, resulting in total damage of $25,000 or more, or any other threshold. Fatalities. A fatality is a death confirmed within 30 days of a transit-related event. This includes transit-related suicides. Police do not include deaths resulting from illness, drug overdoses, or natural causes, including found deceased on transit property, where it is not a result of a collision or suicide. The next threshold is injuries. An injured person is a person transported immediately away from the scene for medical attention. This includes transport by ambulance, private vehicle, or any other means. There are a number of exclusions to include. A person walking away from the scene for medical attention is not considered injured. Medical attention must be sought without delay after the event. Medical attention must be administered at a location other than where the event occurred, meaning that a minor first aid given at the scene would not be considered an injury. Here are some more exclusions. Medical attention due to illnesses should not be reported. For example, a passenger on the bus has a seizure and is transported to the hospital. Also, the exclusions regarding mental health evaluations, declarations of self-harm, intoxication, and overdoses are excluded, just as we mentioned in the SNS 50 section. Now we'll talk about the property damage threshold. Events with total actual or estimated property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000 are reportable. Property damage includes transit vehicle and non-transit vehicle damage, damage to stations, bus stops, and shelters if applicable. The cost of non-transit property, private property, buildings, fences, etc., are also included, as well as the cost of clearing wreckage. NTD uses only general or ballpark estimates, and you may use a variety of methods for estimating. Some of these include, the blue book values, repair amounts for insurance estimates, establish standard property damage estimates for specific event types or severity of damage. Many transit agencies create a list of standardized costs. Or these estimates may be done on a case-by-case basis. Estimated damage excludes personal property such as laptops, cell phones, investigation costs, medical claims, or litigation. Property damage must always be reported on the SNS 40, regardless of amount, including zero damage. If the cost is confirmed as zero, enter a statement in the event description. Otherwise, the analyst will return the report requesting such a statement. If there is a collision involving a transit roadway revenue vehicle, which results in either the transit revenue vehicle or non-transit vehicle being towed, the event is automatically reportable regardless of any other threshold. This is limited to roadway vehicles and therefore excludes ferryboats and trains. For example, a transit bus and car collide. There are no injuries or fatalities, and property damage is only $1,000. But the car is towed from the scene due to disabling damage. The event is reportable. The towaway is not based on the severity of the damage. All evacuations for life safety reasons are reportable. Life safety means there's imminent danger to people in that environment. This includes both directed or customer self-evacuations. Self-evacuations are where customers vacate the property without direction of the transit agency or other authority. Some examples of a life safety reasons are suspicious packages, bomb threats, a smoke event, fire, fuel fumes, noxious odors, or a person with a weapon on a transit vehicle. If a bus has a transmission problem and passengers are evacuated to the sidewalk or shoulder, the transmission problem is not a potentially unsafe situation and therefore is not reportable. Evacuations are not common for collisions. There would need to be a fuel leak or similar life safety situation. As a reminder, to create a major event report, navigate to the home menu option, then choose safety, and choose the appropriate calendar year and click on the folder on the left. Unlike the SNS 50 form, the SNS 40 is not automatically generated, and you only create an SNS 40 if there is a reportable event. To create the form, click on the NTD Safety Forms button located in the upper right corner to access the dashboard. To add a new report, just click on the File New SNS 40 button. Just a reminder that SNS 40 reports are due no later than 30 days after the date of the event. If you have an event to report that includes 2 or more transit modes from your agency, how do you choose which mode to report under? If the event involved a rail mode and a non-rail mode, choose rail. For example, one of your light rail vehicles and one of your buses collide. Report the incident only once under the light rail mode. If the event is between 2 non-rail modes, use the predominant use rule, which is typically based on ridership. For example, if a bus and a paratransit vehicle collide, report the event under the bus mode since it has higher ridership. The first 2 screens will act as a wizard to help determine if the event meets the thresholds. Screen 1 captures the date of the event, the mode, and the type of service, and the event type. This is a snapshot of setup screen 1. Setup screen 1 event types. The first and most common is a collision, followed by fires, hazmat spills, acts of nature, and other safety events that meet a threshold. Each of these will be discussed in more detail later in the presentation. There are 2 categories of security events. They are system security events such as arson, bomb threats, suspicious packages, etc. Basically, they are events that affect the transit system. The second is a personal security event, such as an assault, robbery, homicide, rape, etc., that affect 1 or more persons. The second setup screen asks you a series of questions, some of which are based on the mode and/or type of event you are reporting. This is to determine the reportability of the event and the subforms that need to be generated. This is only a list that we will cover each in more detail. First is the number of injuries and/or fatalities. Then the total estimated property damage amount. The screen also asks about an evacuation threshold question. If the event type is a collision, then you are also asked if the tow-away threshold question. You will also be asked if transit revenue vehicles were involved, which determines if this is a transit or non-transit collision. This is a snapshot of setup screen 2 for the non-rail mode collisions. As I mentioned, if you chose collision on screen 1, then screen 2 captures if there were transit revenue vehicles involved in the event. Select yes if this is true, which includes purchased transportation or PT vehicles as a transit vehicle since you are reporting for this service. You would select no when the collision involves a private vehicle on transit property or a transit non-revenue vehicle collision occurs on transit property. These are typically maintenance vehicle collisions that meet a threshold. Based on the selection you have made and questions you have answered, the system will respond accordingly. If the event is reportable as a major event, the basic information screen will appear. If the event is not reportable as a major event, the system will generate a message that the event is not reportable and ask you if you want to continue. At this point, you can edit the selections on setup screen 2 in case you answered a question incorrectly, which may have made the event seem not reportable. If the event meets the criteria for a major event, the basic information screen will appear next. The basic information screen displays the date you already selected. When entering the time, please be sure to use AM or PM designations, even if you use the military or 24-hour clock format. For the approximate or actual location of the event, please be sure to include the full address, including the city and state. This helps us ensure the coordinates are correct. The geographic location, longitude and latitude is required. You are permitted to enter numbers, a decimal point, and a negative symbol for the longitude. Please use a minimum of 4 decimal places. If you do not have the coordinates, you can use a variety of internet resources, whichever is easiest for you. One site, for example, is Google Maps. This is a snapshot of Google Maps, if you choose to use it. As you can see, there's a box. You just type in the address, and then you can right-click on the screen, and you'll see there at the top the latitude and longitude coordinates. The basic information screen also captures the event description. The description box can hold 2,000 characters. If you exceed the 2,000 character limit, a message will pop up that you exceeded the limit and you will not be able to continue to the next screen until you reduce the number of characters. The description should be concise but descriptive so that the analyst can understand what occurred, how it occurred, and should include the number and type of injuries or fatalities, and if any vehicle was towed. Also, please refrain from using Vehicle 1 or Vehicle 2 or codes such as IV to refer to a vehicle. The analyst has to be able to determine who hit whom and how, and not all reporters refer to Vehicle 1 or IV as the transit vehicle. You may have noticed the event description did not include any personally identifiable information such as names, addresses, badge, or driver's license numbers, and so on. However, do continue to include ages and genders. This helps us validate your reports. The basic information screen now includes attempted suicide and suicide checkboxes when the event type is a collision. This is corroborated by the same checkbox on the injury or fatality form. The last piece of information is the name and phone number of someone to contact for additional information regarding the event. You do not need to enter the name of the person if they are the person reporting the event. When you enter a phone number, enter only the numbers and no parentheses or dots or dashes. The field will self-format. The basic information screen is also the first screen that the progress bar appears on. This bar shows you how many subsections you have to complete and your progress thus far. This is a snapshot of the basic information screen. Before we start reviewing the details of reporting a collision, you may recall that I mentioned one of the big changes is in reporting an assault that results in a collision with a transit vehicle or as a collision event. This, effective in 2023 and forward, and aligns with reporting attempted suicide and suicide by transit vehicle. These will no longer be reported as an assault on the security form. When we get to the injury and fatality forms, you will see how you indicate the assault, if an injury, or homicide, if a fatality. The collision screens will vary slightly depending on the selection on setup screen 2. Typically, there are 4 screens or subforms that may appear when reporting a transit collision. The collision event information screen, the collision information screen, the transit vehicle involved information screen, and if applicable, the other vehicle involved information screen will appear. This is a snapshot of the collision event screen for non-rail modes. So the first collision screen is the collision event information screen. For all the modes, this captures information about the number of transit vehicles involved. The answer would always be 1 unless 2 transit vehicles from your agency collide. The location of the event, such as the transit station, roadway intersection, roadway grade crossing, bus or service stop, non-revenue facility, which would be a transit bus barn, yard, or maintenance facility. Bus or service stop is an appropriate location for modes such as demand response, paratransit, pickup at a person's home. Continuing on with locations, ramps, streets, highways, and freeways are reported as roadway not a grade crossing or intersection. Please do not select other and type in highway or freeway. Other is used for parking or private property. Grade crossings are locations where rail tracks and vehicular traffic intersect. Parking lot entrances, exits, and driveways are not reported as intersections. Use the roadway, not grade crossing or intersection location. For the collision with selection, indicate what the transit vehicle collided with, such as another vehicle, person, animal, fixed object, and so on. A collision with a bicyclist, pedicab, a person in a wheelchair, or on an electric scooter is reported as a collision with a person. Larger scooters like small motorcycles, mopeds, and motorcycles, school buses, or dump trucks are all reported as a collision with a motor vehicle. Use the other selection only when no other selection is appropriate. In a multiple impact collision scenario, report the collision with as the first object or vehicle impacted. For example, a bus collides with a car and then the car hits the building. The collision with selection would be motor vehicle, and you would include the damages to the building and that the building was struck in the event description. The last selection is number of other non-transit vehicles that were involved in the collision. Please note this box is not the total number of vehicles in the collision. It is only the number of non-transit vehicles involved. So please do not include the transit vehicle in this number. We'll look at a few examples of how to determine how many other motor vehicles to report. If car 1 cuts off a bus but no contact is made, and the bus goes on to hit car 2, The number of other vehicles to report is 1 because only car 2 had contact with the bus. Another example is if car 1 hits a car 2, then car 2 hits the bus. The number of other vehicles to report is 2. Again, both car 1 and car 2 had contact. NTD also collects non-transit collisions, such as an accident in transit parking lots or with transit property. The event must meet a reportable threshold. Here are a few examples you can read through. For the number of other vehicles selection, enter the total number of non-revenue or private vehicles involved. The non-transit collision form will appear when you select the collision event type on setup screen 1 and select no to the question, were transit revenue vehicles involved in this collision on setup screen 2. After the collision event information screen, the next screen to appear is the collision information screen shown here. Earlier, I mentioned that we separated the intersection/grade crossing selection into an intersection selection and a grade crossing selection. You'll notice that for this form still includes intersection/grade crossing, but you can no longer select it. It had to be kept due to the mid-year launch for historical data. The collision information screen captures information about the conditions at the scene. The collision information screen captures information about the conditions at the scene, such as the weather and lighting conditions at the time of the collision. The twilight selection is used to refer to both dawn and dusk when it is not full light or full dark out. Please be sure your lighting corroborates the AM/PM time you entered on the basic information screen. Indoors is not used to indicate street lights or lights at a station platform. The condition of the roadway is also collected, such as wet, dry, icy, so on. Here are some considerations when reporting the roadway configuration. You would select limited access highway to report an incident on the freeway. A limited access highway has access limited in some way. For example, it may not allow pedestrians or bicycles. If you chose either roadway intersection or roadway grade crossing on the collision event information screen, the appropriate selection will default on this collision information form. Also, you may have noticed that now when the location is intersection, that only intersection control device selections appear. Or if you select the grade crossing as the location, only grade crossing controls appear. You no longer have to select not applicable off the inappropriate list. At this point, we have completed the collision event information screen. The next screen to be presented collects information about transit vehicles involved. One screen will appear for each transit vehicle involved. The form includes an identifier count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of vehicles. This is the transit vehicle involved screen. The form captures the vehicle type, information about the type and manufacturer of the revenue vehicle involved, the vehicle action at the time of the collision type is captured for all modes. This is the part of the transit vehicle that was impacted. The speed at the time of the collision and a question asking if the vehicle was towed due to disabling damage. The fleet involved section integrates with your agency's most current A30 revenue vehicle inventory form. There are separate A30 forms for each mode and type of service. With this integration, you will choose a vehicle from the list of available options. When this selection is made, the vehicle and fuel types are already part of the selection, thus eliminating making an incorrect selection. If you are operating a new manufacturer that is not in the A30, you have an option to add the vehicle into the form. However, adding a vehicle to the collision form does not update the A30 form itself. If you have questions about the A30, please contact the person at your agency who completes the form. You may have seen earlier this week that the existing fleet option is back up and running, so please be sure to use that. This is a screenshot after clicking on the existing fleet button. The grid displays the available options from your A30 for the mode you are reporting, with columns representing the pertinent data. Some agencies may have many selections, so you can use one of the 4 filter boxes to reduce the grid to show only certain ID numbers, certain types of vehicle types, or vehicle manufacturers. Select a vehicle from the fleet. Click on the checkbox located to the left of each option. Then click on Add Fleet button at the bottom. Once the selection is added, the total vehicles and active fleet vehicles columns shown here will disappear, and the agency fleet ID will appear, which would be more beneficial as part of the record and for reporters for vehicle identification. If the vehicle is not listed with the existing fleet, the user may add a new vehicle by clicking on the New Fleet button. The grid will display drop-down boxes to select a vehicle type, vehicle manufacturer, and a vehicle fuel type. These are lists of all possible options, unrestricted to the agency's A30. After making your selection, click on Add Fleet. This is a screenshot after clicking on the Add Fleet. If you need to make a correction, click on the red X under the Remove column heading and start over. Now we will explore some of the transit vehicle action options. When the transit vehicle is moving into or out of a scheduled service stop, report the location as either making a transit stop or leaving a transit stop accordingly, and report the transit vehicle speed to indicate the vehicle was moving. Do not choose these options if the vehicle was not moving or stopped. If you choose the stopped or parked option, be sure to report the vehicle speed as 0. The vehicle speed must be reported even if it is 0. This diagram shows most of the impact points, which are reported from the point of view of the transit vehicle. We'll look at these options in more detail. Other front impact is used when the front of the transit vehicle is impacted, but not when it would be considered head-on or rear ending. An example would be the front corner bumper hits another vehicle or object while turning, not the bumper on the side at the front. Likewise, other rear impact is used when the transit vehicle is impacted on the rear, but not when it would be considered rear-ended. An example would be if the transit vehicle was backing up and hit a utility pole. Rear-ending and rear-ended must always be reported as a pair. If the transit vehicle hits the rear end of a vehicle, the transit vehicle collision type is reported as rear-ending, and the collision type for the vehicle that was struck in the rear is reported as rear-ended. Don't use either of these terms if using along with other front or other rear impact, unless there are more than 2 vehicles involved. Side impact means that the transit vehicle was impacted anywhere on its side, including the door, the mirror, or the tires, with the exception of when a side swipe occurs. Side swipe is used when 2 vehicles are parallel to each other, going in either the same or opposite directions, and bump and scrape along the sides of each other. Both vehicles would be reported as side swipe. Please note that side swipe cannot be the action chosen when you are reporting a collision with a person. Instead, use side impact. When reporting a T-bone or broadside collision, one vehicle is reported as head-on, and the other vehicle is reported as side impact. So in the diagram, vehicle number 1 and the other motor vehicle would be reported as head-on, and the transit vehicle number 2 would be reported as side impact. Multiple vehicle accidents or chain reaction accidents can be a challenge to report. Remember to consider the first impact or collision type in your analysis. In this diagram, vehicle 1 would be reported as rear-ending. It's doing the hitting, which means that vehicle 2 was rear-ended, which then caused vehicle 2 to be pushed into vehicle 3, the transit vehicle, which would also be reported as rear-ended. For the speed, enter the actual speed of the transit vehicle at the time of the collision. If the speed is unknown, you can use the posted speed for that section of the road, and if needed, adjust that speed based on traffic and/or road conditions at the time of the incident. The last selection on the form is, was this vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage incurred as a result of the collision? Answer yes or no accordingly. If you indicated on the collision event screen that another vehicle was involved, the other vehicle information screen will appear. This screen gathers information about non-transit vehicle or vehicles involved in the collision. If more than one other vehicle is involved, you will need to complete one other vehicle involved information form for each motor vehicle involved. Vehicle counts are included on the form as well as options to add or remove vehicles. This is a screenshot of the other vehicle involved screen for non-rail collision reporting. The form collects the type of other vehicle. The form includes an option for a non-revenue rail vehicle. The automobile option would be used for both cars and passenger vans, such as a Dodge Caravan, for example. The action or physical movement of the other vehicle at the time of the collision is also collected. Just as when reporting the transit vehicle collision type, you are indicating the part of the vehicle that was hit from the point of view of the other vehicle. The form includes the question, was this vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage incurred as a result of the collision? Answer yes or no accordingly. Please select no if the vehicle was towed because the operator was taken away or just wanted it towed. It must be due to disabling damage, even though that may only be a flat tire. This concludes the collision information screen. If your event includes an injury or fatality, you will need to complete a screen for each person. This form also includes a person count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of people. Person type location categories are divided into two groups: persons outside the vehicle and persons inside the vehicle. Transit vehicle rider is the correct choice for passengers boarding or alighting. The attempted suicide checkbox has been modified into 3 radio button options pertaining to attempted suicide, assault, suicide, and homicide. It's very important to note these changes appear on when reporting a collision. The injury and fatality forms for the remaining event types will remain as is. You'll make an appropriate selection and ensure the selection is corroborated in the event description by third-party accounts, police reports, CCTV, etc. For example, if a person is intentionally pushed in front of the bus and therefore thereby is assaulted, and the bus strikes the person, you would choose assault on the injury form or homicide on the fatality form accordingly. Ergo, if a person fell in front of a bus and was struck and injured, you would select no attempted suicide/assault on the injury form. Similarly, the trespasser checkbox has been modified into 3 radio button options pertaining to trespassers. Selections for trespasser, not a trespasser, and insufficient information. A trespasser selection is required. The insufficient information is to be used only when there is no corroborating data to confirm this was intentional. Trespassers are people in unauthorized areas, typically in facilities. Just as with the attempted suicide, if there are police reports, eyewitness statements, etc., to account for trespassing, please include the information in the event description. Using the word trespasser or trespassing is very helpful to the analyst. This is a snapshot of the fatality form. Notice the operator can be either inside and outside vehicles. This is a very common mistake for someone to choose the operator option from outside the vehicle during a vehicle collision. You'll also see the updated suicide selections at the bottom, as well as the new trespasser selections. This is a snapshot of the injury form, where you'll see, once again, the operators inside and outside. This is, once again, a very common mistake for someone to choose the operator option from outside the vehicle. I am now going to pass this off to Grace again to look at non-major reporting.
Thank you so much, James. Now let's look at non-major event reporting. Earlier, we discussed evacuations. Evacuations can be included in any event type, but are less common in collisions. If an evacuation is incorrectly included or excluded, you cannot add or delete it from a report. The entire report will need to be deleted, and a new report entered with or without the evacuation. The evacuation subform includes a verification question to confirm the evacuation was for life safety reasons or a potentially life safety condition. Please do not answer no to the evacuation question. If the evacuation is not for life safety reasons, then deleting the report and creating a new one by answering no to the evacuation question on setup screen 2. This is a screenshot of the evacuation subform. In the evacuation details section, you include a brief description of the evacuation, including the cause. The "what was evacuated" question is used to indicate what actually was evacuated. One choice would be vehicle/vessel, which would mean the train. Do not report the location of the bus at the time. And the last question it asks is if this was a self-evacuation. For example, a self-evacuation is when passengers get off the transit vehicle without being told to depart. And as Anne indicated earlier, some of the slides we are going to skip, so we're going to be skipping the next few slides. Now, there are 2 types of security incidents on screen 1. System security or personal security events, which must meet one or more of the thresholds. For system security events, these occur on transit property and affect the transit system as a whole. Personal security events happen to those individuals on transit property or those boarding or alighting a transit vehicle. This is where you would report suicide or attempted suicides that did not involve an impact with a transit vehicle. Now let's talk about the assault on transit workers. As you know, we have been collecting assaults on transit workers when there is an injury for many years. However, we now have 2 new terms and definitions to learn. The first is for transit worker. This new definition was made specifically to include volunteers rather than the existing definition of a transit employee, which reads that the transit worker is compensated by the transit agency. The second definition is for assault on transit workers. NTD is adopting a statutory definition from the FRN as a circumstance in which an individual knowingly, without lawful authority or permission, and with intent to endanger the safety of any individual, or with a reckless disregard for the safety of human life, interferes with, disables, or incapacitates a transit worker while the transit worker is performing the duties of the transit worker. The assault on a transit worker definition is more defined than the assault definition in the next row. The term assault now applies only to non-worker assaults. The assault definition incurred a slight revision to the definition to ensure consistency with the definition of an assault on a transit worker. The homicide definition is unchanged. Homicide is relative to assault in that any assault resulting in a fatality is reported to the NTD as a homicide event. We will collect the same information and use the same forms for both assaults and homicide. Again, there are two terms used to collect the assault type. These terms classify the assault as physical or non-physical. In a physical assault, the assailant makes physical contact with the worker or may use an object, weapon, or projectile to do so. Projectiles may include bullets, any liquids, the assailant's saliva, or any other substance. In non-physical assaults, there is no physical contact with the worker. Non-physical assaults could include verbal threats, harassment, or interference with the worker's duties. For example, interference with the operator's ability to continue service when one is refusing to get off the vehicle when asked. If either assault or homicide is selected as the event type, then a subsection will appear for additional information on who was assaulted or killed. The first two selections are for operators and workers. The last section, assault/homicide not against other transit worker, would be used to report passengers or patrons. Another subsection will appear if assault/homicide against operator or assault/homicide against other transit worker is selected to collect if this act was either a physical or a non-physical assault. To assist in reporting or determining how to report, we are providing several examples. In the first example, a passenger boards a bus and refuses to pay the fare. He becomes nasty and spits on the operator. The operator requests EMS and is transported for medical attention. Report an assault on the transit operator and indicate that it was a physical assault and include one injury. In the second scenario, this is one that we often see. Two police officers are assaulted during an arrest. Both officers are transported for medical attention. Report an assault on a transit worker, indicate that it was a physical assault, and include two injuries. In this third scenario, we have an event where an operator and a patron were both assaulted. However, only the patron was transported. So far in this presentation, we have learned that if the worker is not transported due to an assault, the event is reported as a non-major event. The assault on the patron is also a reportable event. This is one event, and it cannot be split into two separate events. Therefore, you will create one major report as an assault on the transit operator, and the injury included is for the patron. This is a screenshot of the system security event screen. You may notice that there is an other system security event option on this form. This would be to capture security events that do not meet any other category. For example, shots fired at or objects thrown at a vehicle. This is a screenshot of the personal security event form. You will notice that there is an other personal security event option on this form as well. This is a screenshot of both the subsections when assault/homicide is chosen, and the assault/homicide is against an operator or transit worker. The final event type is other safety events. This is your miscellaneous category. The events must meet one or more of the following thresholds: one or more fatalities, two or more injured, property damage of $25,000 or greater, or an evacuation. Please note that you may report an other safety event with one injury if another one of these thresholds is met. Here are some examples. An evacuation of a transit property due to smoke, fumes, or noxious odors. Any fatality on transit property that is not considered a collision or suicide, fall, electrocution, etc. 2 people thrown from their seats due to a hard brake. 3 people injured when an escalator comes to an abrupt stop. or other safety events resulting in an only single injury reported on the SNS 50 monthly summary form. This is a screenshot of the other safety events screen. At this point, we have completed all of our screens for the reportable event types. Now let's review saving, submitting, and editing reports. At any point from the basic information screen on, the system automatically saves your report. If you close the report without saving or submitting from this point on, these auto-saved reports become pending reports, which are stored as a task in the task menu option. When you are ready to complete the report, click on the task menu option and you will see a listing of each task. Major event report tasks will appear with the SNS 40 in their title. Just click on the task and the system will return you to the screen you were on when you closed the report. Complete the report and save and submit, or if you no longer need the report, you can choose to delete it instead. Save and submit options appear when you are in view form mode. If you do not see a save or submit button, click on the view form button and scroll to the bottom. Once you click on save, the report is saved and it is given an event number at the top of the report. The report stays open so that you may review it. When you submit a report, the report will close and return to the dashboard. Submitting the report releases the report to validation analysts for review and comment. It also notifies the analyst that the report has been created or edited. Please note that unsubmitted reports are excluded from the event, injury, and fatality accounts in your SNS 20 CEO certification form. Analysts may return your report to you for questions or to make corrections. The system will send the last modified user one email for each report that is returned. After you make the correction, be sure to save it and submit it. When reviewing or editing your reports, it is important to learn how to move around the document. Here's a list of the available button tools, though each button may not be available on every single form that you see. One shortcut I would like to point out is the Jump to section button. This button allows you to jump to a specific screen instead of using the next or back buttons. There are several resources available for further information on assaults on transit workers. These resources are continued on the next slide and include guidance for the NTD reporting, as well as an informational presentation by TSO, which covers assault on transit workers' initiatives and how NTD data collection ties into tracking progress towards the risk reduction program. Both the SNS policy manual and NTD FAQ page have been updated to include information about assaults on transit workers. There is also an FAQ for the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan Final Rule. This is going to conclude our presentation. Feel free to reach out to your safety analyst for any questions you may have, or if you prefer to ask questions in a one-on-one session. If you're unsure of who your safety analyst is, please feel free to contact any of the three of us.